The Georgia farmer had lived alone for years, a self-imposed exile etched onto his weathered face. Then, one tempestuous night, 6 women sought sanctuary from a brutal storm. He peered through the narrow crack in his door, his heart a battleground between ingrained caution and a flicker of forgotten compassion. Rain lashed their torn dresses, mud clung to their worn boots, and raw desperation mirrored his own long-held pain. Yet, Thaddeus Crow, scarred by betrayals past, hesitated. He hadn't opened his door to strangers in 12 years, and the price of trust was too high. Thunder ripped across the ravaged land, and the woman at the front, tall and imposing with eyes that held the weight of countless burdens, pressed her palm against the weathered wood. "Please, sir, shelter until morning. We have nowhere else to turn." Inside, Thaddeus tightened his grip on the rifle behind the door. 6 women, 6 strangers, 6 potential breaches in his carefully fortified solitude. Experience had taught him that extending a hand invited agony. The scars on his hands were a brutal testament to that lesson. "Road's that way," he rasped through the wood, his voice rough from years of disuse. "Town's 15 miles south, though the bridge is washed out." Another voice, younger, trembling with fear, called out, "We tried to cross, but the river is a raging torrent. Our wagon is hopelessly mired in the mud." Through the gap, Thaddeus saw the youngest of the women, barely more than a girl. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. Pregnant. His chest constricted against his will. Pregnancy meant responsibility, a connection he had deliberately severed. "That ain't my concern," he declared, though the conviction in his voice wavered. Then, the older woman stepped forward. Gray hair plastered to her head by the relentless rain, but her spine straight as a honed blade. "My name is Bertie Walsh. This is my granddaughter Clementine, and these are our traveling companions. We are not beggars, mister. We can offer payment for your hospitality." Thaddeus almost scoffed. What could they possibly possess that would be worth risking the delicate balance of his secluded existence? Worth shattering the silence that had become his shield? Worth opening the door to the inevitable chaos that trailed desperate souls? The rain intensified, morphing into hail that hammered against the roof, each strike of violent percussion. Above the storm's fury, a chilling sound pierced the night, the distant howl of wolves. His blood ran cold. The pack had grown bolder, venturing closer to the farm in their desperate hunger. "Did you hear that?" Magnolia's voice sliced through the tempest. "Those are not stray dogs, Mr. Crow. Those are predators." Thaddeus shut his eyes. 12 years of carefully cultivated isolation. 12 years of fragile peace. Now, 6 strangers besieged his doorstep. Wolves circled, and a storm raged with unforgiving force. The pregnant girl cried out, doubling over in pain. Bertie supported her, casting a desperate glance toward the door. "She has been experiencing pains all afternoon, and the cold and damp are exacerbating the situation." That decided it. Not conscience, which he had deliberately suppressed, but cold, hard practicality. A woman giving birth in the midst of a storm, with wolves circling, meant screams, blood, a siren song for every predator within miles. Thaddeus released the 3 heavy bolts he had installed long ago, after the last time he had foolishly trusted. The door creaked open, revealing his gaunt, weathered face and piercing, suspicious eyes. "One night," he growled, stepping aside just enough to allow them entry. "At first light, you will be gone." As the 6 women hurried into the relative warmth of his cabin, trailing mud and unspoken secrets across his pristine floors, Thaddeus felt a subtle shift in the air, a change that transcended the tempest outside. Because what none of them yet knew was that the storm was not the only hunter on their trail, and by morning, one of these women would vanish without a trace. The women infiltrated his cabin like floodwaters, finding fissures in his carefully constructed barriers. Magnolia assumed control with effortless authority, guiding Clementine to the chair closest to the hearth, while Bertie examined the pregnant girl with practiced concern. The other 3, sisters if their shared features were any indication, huddled together near the wall, whispering in hushed tones that eluded Thaddeus's grasp. He observed them from the corner, rifles still clutched in his hands as they discarded their soaked cloaks, exposing glimpses of truths concealed beneath their desperate facade. These were not ordinary travelers. Magnolia's dress, despite the mud and ruin, bore the mark of fine tailoring. The sisters possessed the posture of women accustomed to privilege, and Bertie's hands, though weathered, exhibited the calluses of a seamstress, not a field hand. "You're running from something," Thaddeus stated, his voice flat. It was not a question. Magnolia's eyes snapped to his, and for a fleeting moment a glint of something dangerous flashed within them, like a cornered animal poised to either flee or retaliate. "Are we not all running from something, Mr. Crow?" Thaddeus Crow. The name tasted like ash on his tongue. "Well, Mr. Crow, we appreciate your unexpected generosity." She offered a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "We are merely travelers caught in rather inclement circumstances." Thaddeus had endured enough lies in his 47 years to instantly recognize another. Before he could probe further, Clementine cried out, her face contorting in agony. Bertie's hands moved instinctively to the girl's abdomen, searching for information only experience could provide. "How far along are you, child?" Bertie asked, her voice laced with concern. 7 months, perhaps 8, Clementine gasped, her face paling. "But the pain commenced this morning, and they are intensifying." The eldest of the 3 sisters stepped forward, auburn hair streaked with silver, worry lines etched deeply around her emerald eyes. "I am Nora, and these are my sisters, Ivy and Della. I have borne 3 children. That girl is in premature labor." Thaddeus felt the walls of his carefully regimented world closing in on him, a birth within his isolated sanctuary amid strangers who carried secrets like concealed daggers. "We need hot water immediately," Magnolia declared, already moving purposefully toward his kitchen. "Clean cloths, soft bedding, anything that can provide comfort and warmth." "Now just hold on a minute," Thaddeus began, but Bertie swiftly cut him off. "Unless you desire a dead girl and a stillborn babe on your conscience, you will assist us, Mr. Crow." Her voice resonated with the authority of someone who had witnessed too much death to waste precious time on niceties. Outside, the wind howled like a tormented spirit. The wolves howled again, drawing closer. Through the small window, Thaddeus caught fleeting glimpses of yellow eyes reflecting the erratic flashes of lightning. As he reluctantly gathered the requested supplies, he noticed subtle inconsistencies that did not add up. Dela repeatedly checked the windows, her hand instinctively gravitating towards something hidden beneath the folds of her skirt. Ivy hummed almost inaudibly, but the cadence was not a nervous tick. It was the calculated calm born of discipline and training. And Magnolia moved through his kitchen with a precision that suggested she was mapping escape routes. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice barely audible, as he placed a steaming bucket of water on the table. "What makes you believe we have done anything?" Nora responded, but her hands visibly trembled as she tore clean cloth into strips. "Because innocent people do not travel in groups of 6 during the height of storm season, they do not carry themselves as if anticipating impending conflict, and they certainly do not assess exits with the intensity your companion there is displaying." Magnolia paused, her movements halting. "Her," she echoed. "You are remarkably observant, Mr. Crow." 12 years of solitude sharpens one's perceptions. 12 years? Ivy asked, her voice softer than her sister's. "Why? Alone?" The question struck him like a physical blow. Thaddeus felt his chest constrict as buried memories clawed their way to the surface. Sarah's radiant face, the inferno, the agonizing choice that had irrevocably altered his destiny. "That is none of your concern," he stated, his voice laced with steel. But Clementine's piercing scream abruptly shattered the mounting tension. "Something is not right," Bertie declared, her face etched with concern. "The baby has turned breech. We need to get her prone, now." As they carefully assisted Clementine onto his bed, the very bed where he had slept alone for more than a decade, Thaddeus caught Magnolia observing him with calculating intensity. "You have knowledge of childbirth," she said, her voice low. "I can see it in your face." He did know. God help him. He possessed a depth of understanding regarding the initiation of new life that no man should ever have to bear. But that knowledge came with a terrible price, a price he had sworn never to pay again. Thunder crashed overhead, and in the subsequent flash of lightning, Thaddeus observed something outside that turned his blood to ice. Tracks in the mud outside his window. Boot prints, distinctly fresh ones. They were not alone in this storm. Thaddeus seized his rifle and positioned himself at the window, keeping his body concealed in shadow. The boot prints were clearly defined in the mud. Too large to belong to any of the women. Too recent to have been left before the storm's arrival. Someone had been watching his cabin. Someone who had followed 6 desperate women through a deadly storm. "What is it?" Magnolia appeared beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "Company," he replied grimly, checking the rifle's load. "The kind you were hoping to evade." Her face drained of color. "How many?" "At least 2 sets of prints, possibly more." He turned to face her, and he saw genuine terror in her eyes. The carefully constructed facade she had been wearing had crumbled. "Now you are going to tell me precisely what you are running from." Before she could respond, Clementine screamed again. The sound was raw, desperate, capable of carrying through the howling storm, alerting anyone in the vicinity to their location. "We need to muffle her cries," Della said, producing a leather strap from her bag. "If they hear her—" "No," Thaddeus intervened, placing himself between them and the bed. "You will not gag a woman in labor, not in my home." "You do not comprehend," Ivy whispered urgently. "If they discover us here, they will murder all of us, including you." "Then speak plainly." Magnolia closed her eyes, assessing her limited options as another contraction convulsed Clementine's body. When she opened them again, Thaddeus recognized the expression of someone who had exhausted all other possibilities. "We witnessed something," she confessed. "Something we were never intended to see." "What kind of something?" "A murder." The word landed like a stone in a tranquil pond, creating ripples of dread. 3 nights ago in Silver Creek, a man named Carson Vale, who owns half the territory and has judges and sheriffs in his pocket, killed a family. Father, mother, 2 small children, all over a disputed land claim. Thaddeus felt a chill settle in his stomach. He knew that name. Every farmer within 100 miles knew Carson Vale and lived in fear of him. "He saw us watching," Nora added, her voice hollow. "We have been running ever since. His men are not the type to leave witnesses." "How many men are we talking about?" 6 that we have identified, possibly more." Magnolia glanced nervously toward the window. "They are professionals, skilled killers. They will not cease until we are dead." Lightning illuminated the cabin, and in that fleeting moment, Thaddeus saw his reflection in the glass. A man who had sought refuge from the world for 12 years, suddenly confronted with the agonizing choice between maintaining his fragile isolation and taking a stand against unspeakable evil. Just then, Bertie spoke from beside Clementine's bed, her voice remarkably steady despite the surrounding chaos. "The baby is coming now. There is no more time for talk." But as Clementine pushed, her face contorted with pain and determination, something wet splattered against the cabin's front window. Too viscous to be rain, too dark to be mud. Thaddeus moved closer and saw the horrifying truth that made his grip tighten on his rifle. Blood. Fresh blood streaming down the glass, forming a grim message written in violence. "They are here," he announced quietly. And then they heard the first gunshot, followed by a man's voice cutting through the storm. "We know you are in there, ladies. Emerge peacefully and perhaps we will make it swift." But Clementine could not be moved. The baby was crowning, and any disruption at this stage would certainly claim both their lives. They were trapped. 6 women, a man who had forgotten how to fight, and killers outside who would not hesitate to burn the cabin to the ground with them all inside. That was when Thaddeus remembered something about himself that he had long buried, along with so much else. He had once been a very different kind of man. The voice outside belonged to death itself. Cold, patient, unwavering. Thaddeus recognized the tone. He had heard it before, 12 years ago, when different men had come for different reasons, but with the same terrifying certainty. 5 minutes, the voice continued. Then we commenced the burning. Clementine bit down hard on a leather strap, her body racked by another agonizing contraction. The baby's head was now visible, slick with blood and amniotic fluid. Bertie's hands worked with desperate efficiency, but even in skilled hands, nature could not be rushed. 2 minutes more, Bertie whispered. Maybe 3. We do not have 3 minutes, Della said, checking the load on a small pistol she had concealed in her boot. They will torch this place. Thaddeus moved to his gun cabinet, the one he had vowed never to open again. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay the tools of his former life. A Colt 45, a sawed-off shotgun, and something that made Magnolia's eyes widen with recognition when she saw it. Your military past, she breathed. Thaddeus strapped on the gun belt, his fingers working the buckles with a familiarity that defied years of disuse. It was a long time ago. What unit were you attached to? The kind that does not exist on paper. He pumped the shotgun, the sound sharp and deadly in the confined space. The kind they deploy when regular soldiers are inadequate. Another gunshot rang out, closer than the last. Through the window, Thaddeus saw muzzle flashes illuminating the storm. They were testing distances, preparing for their assault. Mr. Crow, Ivy said, her voice strangely calm. If you were in our situation, what would you do right now? She held her sister's pistol in one hand, Della's knife in the other. Fight and likely perish protecting strangers or surrender them to ensure his own survival. The question hung heavy in the air. Thaddeus scanned each face. Magnolia's desperate plea, the sister's grim determination, Bertie's fierce concentration as she ushered new life into a world consumed by violence. Della, take position at the rear window. Ivy, you are on the east wall. Nora, remain with Bertie and the girl. Thaddeus moved purposefully toward the front door, his voice filled with the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers in impossible circumstances. Magnolia, you are with me. You seem to know enough. He handed her a loaded pistol. Point and shoot. Do not hesitate. Outside, the killers were advancing. Thaddeus could hear their clipped communication. Short whistles, quick commands that spoke of disciplined military training. These were not common bandits. They were professionals, like him. But they had made one critical error. They believed they were hunting helpless women and a timid farmer. They had no idea they had cornered a ghost from a forgotten war. The first man appeared at the window, his face pressed against the glass, attempting to peer inside. Thaddeus put a bullet through his skull before he could raise an alarm. The body slumped into the mud with a sickening thud. Now it begins, Thaddeus said grimly, working the shotgun's action. The cabin erupted in gunfire. Bullets tore through wood, shattered glass, and filled the air with deadly debris. Della cried out from the back window, "Hit, but I'm still combat capable." Ivy returned fire, her shots controlled and efficient. Through it all, Clementine pushed. Bertie worked, and new life struggled to emerge into a world gone mad. A shadow flickered past the shattered front window. Thaddeus tracked it with the shotgun, waiting for the opportune moment. When the killer stepped into view, weapon raised, Thaddeus squeezed the trigger. The blast ripped through the man's chest. "Two down," he called out. But his triumph was fleeting, because that was when they heard the terrifying sound of flames crackling against wood. The killers had set the cabin on fire. They had mere minutes before the entire structure was engulfed, minutes before smoke inhalation claimed them all. And at that moment, Clementine's baby chose to make its dramatic entrance into the world. The newborn's cry pierced through the cacophony of gunfire and the roar of the fire, a sound both pure and innocent, completely oblivious to the violent world it had entered. Bertie held the tiny, blood-soaked infant aloft, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "It's a girl," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Even as smoke began to seep through the floorboards, the fire spread with terrifying speed. "These were not common criminals," Thaddeus said, reloading the shotgun. "They employed accelerant, likely oil from their supplies. Professional killers who had prepared for every contingency. We must evacuate. Now." "Clementine cannot be moved," Bertie protested. "She has lost too much blood. Moving her now would be fatal." Remaining here will guarantee her demise. Thaddeus grabbed blankets from his closet, gently wrapping them around both mother and child. Della, what is your status? Gunshot wound to my shoulder. I can continue to fight. Della's face was pale but resolute. It is not my dominant arm. Magnolia appeared beside him, her elegant dress torn and stained with blood, but her eyes burning with resolve. There is something you must know about us, she said urgently. Now is not the time. We are more than just witnesses, she said, her voice firm. We are Carson Vale's property. All of us. He owns the establishment where we worked. We were not merely spectators to the murder. We were there because he commanded us to watch. He wanted us to witness the consequences of defying him. The puzzle pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. You were intended to spread the word, to serve as unofficial warnings to other women within Vale's network. But you rebelled. Ivy spoke from her position near the wall. When we saw those innocent children murdered, we could no longer comply. So you ran, and now he will never cease hunting us, Nora added. Because we possess damaging knowledge, and we have defied him. In his world, that is a sentence of death. The flames began consuming the main room, licking at the wooden walls like hungry predators. The heat was becoming unbearable, and each breath was now tainted with smoke. Outside, Thaddeus could hear the remaining killers shifting their positions, waiting for them to flee into the open. How many remain out there? He asked. At least 4, Magnolia replied. Maybe 6. Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly, calculating the odds. 4 armed professionals against him, 5 women, a newborn infant, and 1 woman barely conscious. He had faced worse odds, but never with so much innocent life hanging in the balance. That was when Bertie revealed the final devastating truth, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. There is one more thing, something that Magnolia has not shared. Magnolia spun around, fear etched across her face. Bertie, do not. One of us is not who she appears to be. Bertie's eyes locked onto Thaddeus's. One of us has been working for Carson Vale all along, providing him with information and leading him directly to us. Before Bertie could expose the traitor, the cabin's front wall imploded in a shower of sparks and burning timbers. A man emerged from the inferno, seemingly forged from hellfire itself. Tall, lean, with eyes devoid of mercy and a gun that never missed its mark. Ladies, Carson Vale said, his voice calm and cultured despite the apocalyptic scene. I believe you possess something that rightfully belongs to me. Carson Vale stood framed by the flames, an infernal apparition. His tailored suit remained immaculate despite the storm, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his smile cold and predatory. Behind him, 3 armed men stepped through the burning doorway, weapons trained on everyone inside. Now, Vale said, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. No need for further dramatics, Mr. Crow, though I must confess, your reputation precedes you. Captain Thaddeus Crow, formerly of the Union's clandestine operations. Thaddeus maintained his grip on the shotgun, his mind racing. How had Vale discovered his military past? That information was more deeply buried than any secret. Surprised by my knowledge of your history? You shouldn't be. A man does not disappear for 12 years without leaving some traces behind. Vale's eyes glittered with cruel intelligence, particularly after the regrettable incident at Millfield. The mere mention of the name struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. Millfield, the mission that had shattered his soul. The agonizing choice he had been forced to make between saving civilians and carrying out his orders. The choice that had cost him everything. Yes, Millfield, Vale went on, clearly pleased that he had struck a nerve. I know about the fire, your wife Sarah, the child you could not save. Magnolia gasped softly. In all their desperate conversations, she had never grasped the profound depth of Thaddeus's loss. He heard Clementine whispering to her newborn, instinctively shielding her. However, we are not here to dwell on ancient history, Vale said, his tone growing businesslike. We are here to reclaim my property. 5 women who violated their agreements. 5 women who witnessed events they should not have. 5 women who now must face the consequences of their transgression. 5, Bertie spoke up, still cradling the infant. I count 6 of us. Vale's smile widened. Do you? Let us examine the situation. Magnolia, one of my most prized assets. The 3 sisters who foolishly imagined they could purchase their freedom. Young Clementine, with her illegitimate child. His gaze came to rest on Bertie, and something resembling affection flickered across his face. And dear Bertie Walsh, my most trusted employee for the past 15 years. The revelation detonated like a bomb. Bertie, the grandmotherly figure, the protector, the one they all instinctively trusted, was working for Carson Vale. No, Ivy whispered. It's not true. Not only is it true, but it is essential to my business model. Vale stepped further into the inferno, unfazed by Thaddeus's shotgun. You see, Bertie has been providing me with invaluable information regarding escape attempts for well over a decade. How else do you think I was always able to apprehend my girls before they crossed the state line? Magnolia's face twisted with betrayal and fury. You have been spying on us, all of us. It is simply a job, Bertie said in a low voice. However, her hands were shaking as she cradled the infant. Just a job. I needed the money, my husband's medical bills, my daughter's gambling debts. But something shifted 3 nights ago, Vale said smoothly. When you witnessed me disciplining the Hendricks family, Bertie made an unforeseen decision. Instead of reporting the attempted escape, she chose to join it. Thaddeus watched as the old woman's face crumbled. The accumulated weight of her betrayals seemed to crush her. Why? Magnolia demanded. After all those years, why would you assist us now? Bertie looked down at the infant cradled in her arms. Because I remembered what it felt like to be innocent. This baby, she did not choose this life, none of you did. Vale laughed, the sound as abrasive as broken glass. Touching, but belated redemption does not erase 15 years of collaboration. He raised his pistol, aiming directly at Bertie's head. And it certainly does not erase the consequences. The flames were consuming the cabin, the heat becoming unbearable. Smoke was choking the air, making it difficult to breathe. They had seconds before the structure collapsed entirely. Last chance, Mr. Crow, Vale said. Stand aside and I shall allow you to live. These women are coming with me. Their defiance requires a harsh lesson. Thaddeus glanced around at the faces of the women. Magnolia was terrified but defiant. The sisters were holding each other with desperate love. Clementine was weak but protective of her child, and Bertie was crying, her face filled with the regret of her choices. All of them depended on a broken man who had been hiding from such a moment for the last 12 years of his life. You know what the problem is with you, Vale? Thaddeus said, adjusting his grip on his shotgun. Enlighten me. You forgot to count the baby. Thaddeus fired his shotgun. The blast tore through Carson Vale's chest before he could react, sending him flying backward into the flames. The inferno consumed him in a matter of seconds, cutting short his anguished screams. Vale's men immediately opened fire. Thaddeus was already moving. He rolled behind the overturned table, pulling Magnolia down with him as bullets pierced through the wood above their heads. Della, Ivy, now! He shouted. The sisters began firing. Della's wounded shoulder did not stop her from putting 2 bullets into the nearest gunman. Ivy flanked left. Her shots were precise and deadly. 2 more of Vale's gunmen lay dead on the burning floor in seconds. The last man turned to run. There was nowhere for him to go. The cabin was now an inferno, and the only exit was in the direction he had come. He chose the fire over Thaddeus's gun, screaming as the flames swallowed him whole. We have to go, Thaddeus said, gathering Clementine in his arms. She was weak, clutching her child. The structure is coming down. They stumbled through the smoke. Thaddeus used his boots to kick out the burning boards. Cool air rushed in, providing temporary relief from the suffocating heat. They escaped outside into the storm. The rain had slowed, and the morning sky was lighting up the horizon. They huddled together. They watched as Thaddeus's carefully constructed life burned to the ground. Where will you go? He asked Magnolia. West, California, far enough away from Vale. They have the means to start a new life for themselves. "What about all of us?" Della asked. Looking at Bertie, she made a pointed gesture towards her past. The old woman sat apart, tears in her eyes. "I do not deserve to go with you," she said. "After all I have done, you saved us," Clementine said weakly. "When it mattered the most, you chose the right side. 15 years of poor decision-making do not vanish as a result of a single choice." Thaddeus assessed Bertie. The shame, guilt, and a hint of forgiveness. He recognized her. He had carried that for the last 12 years. "You could say that," he said quietly. "But choosing the right side can help balance the scales." Magnolia stood up, brushing the mud from her dress. "Come with us, all of us. Start over in a new world." The offer hung. Thaddeus looked at his burning home and the 6 women. The walls he had built to isolate him from everything came crashing down. Real protection comes from standing with others as they fight the darkness. "First, I have business to take care of," he said. Vale had other partners who profited from other people's misery. Someone needs to make them understand the consequences. Magnolia smiled genuinely. The Union's clandestine operations. They began moving to the road. While they were walking, Clementine chose to name her daughter, Sarah, after a woman. This woman's memory had saved them all. Thaddeus realized that forgiveness was not to be earned, but rather, it was a choice. 6 months later, at the new cabin Thaddeus built, a letter arrived. The letter was postmarked from Sacramento and was written in a careful manner. "Sarah took her first steps and Bertie says she looks like a fighter. Thank you for reminding all of us that some battles are worth winning. M." So, in the end, we see how even after years of isolation and pain, Thaddeus Crow found the courage to break down his walls and embrace a new kind of life, not just saving these women, but ultimately saving himself. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest storms, compassion and the choice to stand against injustice can ignite hope and forge unexpected connections. And sometimes the people who need saving the most are the ones who appear to be lost. What did you think of Thaddeus's transformation? I'd love to hear your thoughts, any questions you have, or even just your favorite moment from the story in the comments below. Let's get a conversation going. And if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more stories that explore the complexities of the human spirit and the power of second chances. We have more tales to tell. Thanks for watching.